Jazz has always been a sort of underground thing. You know, it's never been popular really as such. I think when people look back at the eras and think jazz was popular, it never really was. The pop music was always popular. Jazz musicians have not really ever been in a place where they could go out and be called popular or be getting press, because most of the people in the world are just not really that interested in it or even know what it is. Nowadays, I think if people are, you know, out of curiosity go to see a jazz gig that's been promoted in Dublin, a comment we often get at the gigs is people will say, I don't like jazz, but I like this. But this is jazz, you know, but I don't normally like jazz, but, you know, what are they hearing, you know?
3, 4, chord, 2, 3. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then. Can you bring that chord up, the high note up to the fifth of that? Which one? Can you bring that up to? Can you bring that up to C sharp?
It's never been a huge scene in Ireland, the jazz thing, but there's always been a few people playing in different styles. If you take from the earliest days of jazz, which was the New Orleans Dixieland or trad as they called it, that was very much around when I left school. There was an awful lot of bands playing trad and playing in pubs and Sunday sessions, and very few of those guys still alive now. You were saying you saw Des Hopkins and those guys. They're pretty much, of the fellas I knew, they're pretty much the last of them, you know.
I think there's a real myth in jazz that you need to know anything about it to enjoy it. I think all art is like that. I think all art should be able to be experienced on many different levels. And I think the more you know about an art form, certainly jazz, you experience it on a different level, but I don't necessarily think it's a better level. I think it's a mix, again, with those people. I think, you know, my ideal is to have someone walk in and they've never heard jazz at all and like it. I want those people to come to my concerts and other jazz concerts and enjoy them, you know.
I think when people discover jazz, it's probably mainly coloured by what accidental music they've heard, you know, like when, say, people are leaving school or in their late teens or early 20s, the kind of music they become exposed to. So they may have started out playing simple rock music, but discovered jazz through different people they've met or college professors or something. Most of the jazz that's promoted in Ireland nowadays, and most of the jazz that's being played, particularly by the younger guys who are coming through, is this sort of more European influenced postmodern jazz. There are certainly, not that I've seen anyway, there are no young guys coming through who seem to have any desire to play Dixieland jazz. There seems to be nowadays a trend for this European, Scandinavian influenced jazz that's more classically influenced than say American traditional jazz influenced. People do their own compositions and far out kind of time signatures and dark chords, and the postmodern stuff is just not really quite as much fun to listen to as the stuff that was up to, in the periods of jazz that was up to about the late 60s or so.
Jazz evolved to be this thing, and it got as far as like free jazz and then just went back, you know. It was like evolving from, you know, from trad jazz and Dixieland jazz to like swing music with Lester Young and Count Basie, to bebop with Charlie Parker, and then like hard bop, and then like Coltrane started to be in between, and Ornette Coleman, and it became free jazz, and then all that stuff. But then it went into fusion and rock fusion and stuff, and then people started to look back and play the old music again. It's kind of sad to me that we're fighting so hard to get younger people and all people exposed to jazz, all jazz, and then one person, firmly within the jazz community is hating on one specific type of jazz. It's disappointing to me.
It's certainly it's more experimental. I mean, there is an argument which is completely fair that jazz has to keep moving on, so people keep on trying to move the music and find some way of expressing it. Trying to keep up with the times, maybe linking it to pop music genres, rap, hip hop, things like this, bringing this into it. But certainly it seems to me that no matter how far out they go, it does seem to get darker and darker. It seems to me it gets harder and harder to listen to. Most jazz musicians, as far as I can see, of the new generation and the new generations that keep coming, are studied and educated in jazz, and the jazz that they're being taught seems to me primarily a postmodernist approach to jazz. There's a lot of using funny time signatures and dark chords and twisting things to make them further and further out, more free improvisation and so on. That doesn't always amount to something really terribly easy to listen to.
So it's a B major, and then a B flat minor, and then you're only hitting it on the first note of each one, so it's...
I think what's pleasing to listen to is not objective, is it? It isn't. Like, it's a very subjective thing. Taste is subjective. And I'm sure there are thousands and thousands of people who don't find Dixieland pleasing to listen to. Otherwise, it would be dominating the charts, not Ed Sheeran. I think a lot of the reason it's not popular is because people haven't heard it. I do believe that. With jazz in general, I think a lot of people would love it if they just heard it. There's so much stigma behind jazz, and that's one of them, is that it isn't pleasing to listen to. And as soon as someone tells you something isn't going to be pleasing to listen to, and you go in and listen to it, you're not going to find it pleasing to listen to. In terms of, funny time signatures and weirder music, like, people feel fucking weird sometimes. Sometimes you just, sometimes you feel a bit mad. And you, like, if you're expressing yourself with improvisation, like, sometimes you feel weird. Like, if you just play happy all the time, that's not honest to me, You look at a lot of other medias, like even comedy, like weird comedy is really popular. A lot of modern art is weird. But it's, it's popular, like, and people seem to be fine with that. But for some reason, music, maybe because it's seen as being in the background or something, people don't like it to be that weird.
Can we give that one more whirl? Maybe intro to Outhead. How's it end?
Bit of a turnaround.
I think the thing with the way jazz is covered in the media in general, it's hard for me to comment on the internet media because I don't follow it. But I think there are a lot of sites out there that dedicated jazz fans can look up. Whereas in the newspaper and stuff, it has probably got less. The Irish Times is good, but the Irish Independent, they dropped it, which is not good. They dropped their jazz critic about a year ago. Lyric FM on the radio dropped their jazz shows as well about a year ago. So that's not good. So maybe on the internet it's there, but certainly on the Irish radio it is falling away, and in the Irish newspapers in general falling away. It's hard to know which way to look at it, whether the media like Lyric and the Irish Independent, for example, have dropped their jazz because they've perceived there's no interest, or whether there just isn't really enough people, or whether the fact that they drop it, then people know less about it. It's hard to tell.
There's a real tendency to say that jazz is dying. And I think that a lot of that is just to do with popularity. But when you look at the music that's being made, a lot of it is really incredible. And I think it's alive and well. You know, I don't think we need to worry about fixing anything. I just think we need to we don't need to change anything we do. We just need to change the way we present it to the world. The internet age has left us behind. And it's because we don't know how to do that stuff. Like, we play our instruments and we spend our time practicing our instruments and then we go and do gigs. That's what we do. But if we just add a couple more things on top of that, like, I think, you know, it's never going to be like on, you know, the top of the charts. Improvised music is never going to be.
I'd say in 10 to 15 years, the way I've seen the scene going just in the last, say, 5 years, I'd say that even a lot of the hard bop element will have gone out of it. So there'll be, jazz will be probably even more underground, but the actual musical content of it, I think, is just going to go further up its own arse, basically. I've got a